All right, everybody, what's up? Welcome into Best on the Board, presented by BetMGM. Michael Beller and Casey Joyner here with you on this lovely Friday. And why do I say lovely Friday, even though that seems like 90% of the country is dealing with some sort of winter weather in one way or another? Because we are just 48 hours away, KC, from championship Sunday. Bengals and Chiefs, Rams and 49ers. By Sunday night, we know what the Super Bowl matchup is going to be. So this is a very fun couple of days for us here in the football world. And hopefully you can keep it rolling, KC. 3-0 last week in this space. So let's do it, man. Let's keep things rolling here.
Yeah, and boy, this week is going to have a heck of a time living up to last weekend.
I mean, let's be honest. It's not going to. Like, the stakes are higher, so it's still going to be fun, of course, in that way, and we can still get two very good games, but last week was a week for the ages, a week that we are going to remember for a long time, a benchmark sort of week, right? 10 years from now, we'll have another crazy playoff week, and those of us who remember, those of us who are old enough will say, maybe not quite the divisional round of 2022, but it was a fun week. It was this 2032 playoff round was a fun one, so it's going to be hard to live up to for sure, but still, with the stakes, Super Bowl trips on the line for these four teams, definitely have something fun in store, a fun weekend ahead of us this weekend. So let's do it, man. You ready? Let's get into it. Let's get into these two games. Let's start in the AFC. We talked about this yesterday on yesterday's show. Me, Andrew DeWitt, and Zach Jackson. We're just rolling through both games and really just trying to break them down from every single betting angle. So right now at BetMGM, we're still looking at the Chiefs -7.5. A lot of other shops have this as Chiefs -7, but at MGM, it is still Chiefs -7.5 now. It is +100 on that 7.5, -120 on the Bengals +7.5. And then the Bengals money line sitting at +275, 54.5 the total right now at BetMGM on this game. KC, we know these two teams met about a month ago. The Bengals getting a huge regular season win. It's the reason why they're playing each other this week instead of last week, because it knocked the Chiefs down. It locked the Bengals into the playoffs. Bengals winning that game 34-31, coming back from multiple score deficits to win that one and really put themselves on the map as a true contender for this AFC championship. And now here they are 3-4 weeks later, finding themselves matched up with the Chiefs once again. Is there anything from that game in the regular season that you look at that you think we can point to as something that is going to be instructive for this AFC championship matchup?
Very curious to see about the Bengals offense because, I mean, they've got a lot of big playability, and they got Burrow, they've got Chase, but yeah, everybody we know. But the reality is they scored 19 or fewer points in 3 of the last 6 contests, and the biggest scoreboard showing was a 41-point outburst against Baltimore that happened because Baltimore secondary is in terrible shape, maybe COVID and injuries. So, but the one time they did score big points in the last 6 weeks where they didn't have that kind of a favorable situation was against the Chiefs. The Chiefs also, think about the Chiefs is when in 2019, if you go back and look at their run to that Super Bowl, they, after about when Mahomes got hurt and when he did that sneak and he hurt his knee, after that, they were a much more run-centric team than people give them credit for. I think they only threw for 300 or more net passing yards 3 times the rest of the year. They were a very run-heavy team, in part also because Andy Reid didn't like getting into shootouts. The 2018 Chiefs and 2019 Chiefs didn't fare well when they got into a shootout, and I call a shootout when each team scores 24 or more points. So I have a feeling that the Bengals would like to see this game turn into a shootout because it would be something that would generally tend to be in their favor, you would think, and they did win the last shootout. Having said that, Kansas City's done a lot better in shootouts of late, so I'm not sure the Bengals want to go that direction, but I'll guarantee the Chiefs probably don't want to go in that direction because they lost the last time out like that, and that's not a way that historically they fare very well.
So then are you betting under in this one? 54.5. It's a pretty high total.
I would go under in this one just because I think the Chiefs are definitely
you lean under, or would you bet under?
If you ask, I like the under probably more than I like the point spread in this one. I'll put it that way. I like the under more than the point spread. Where if I had, I'd be leaning the point spread, but I would be definitely thinking to bet the under in this. Even though both teams played, like I say, Kansas City had that game last week. Andy Reid doesn't like shootouts, and I think he would prefer to avoid them if he can. And plus, Cincinnati has given up a lot of yardage on the ground of late too. They've given up a ton of yards on the ground of late, so I think Kansas City will be able to run the ball.
So Joe Burrow in that regular season game, I would say, given the opponent and given what was at stake for the Bengals, so they knew that if they won that game, not only did they get this signature win over the Chiefs, but they locked up the AFC North with that victory. So given that, I would say that was the best game of his career. It's not the pure best statistical game of his career. That would be the week before, the game you referenced against the Ravens. But this was the best game of Joe Burrow's 2-year career to this point. 30 for 39, 446 yards passing, and 4 touchdowns. Jamar Chase had the monster game on the other side. It was really that Jamar Chase 70-yard touchdown on the first or second play in the second half that seemed to flip the script. And that was a 28-17 game at halftime that ended 34-31 Chiefs. So the Chiefs outscored the Bengals outscored the Chiefs, 17-3 in the second half of that game. And so, I think you look at that and you wonder, how do the Chiefs find a way to slow down the passing game a little bit more? They sacked Joe Burrow 4 times in that game, which, on paper, in a neutral setting, sounds like you get after the quarterback 4 times. You're pretty happy with that. I think they're going to need to get to him a little bit more than 4 times. And they should, the Chiefs should feel like they should be able to get to Joe Burrow. Maybe not the 9 that Tennessee did last week, but something in between that. And I think that's going to be one of the fulcrums on which this game ultimately swings is, do the Chiefs get to Joe Burrow, not just 4, 5, 6 times, but also with enough consistent pressure, enough hurries, enough knockdowns that they make him a little bit more uncomfortable in this game than they did the first time around when these two teams met each other. I think that's going to be something that is really going to be one of the real pivots of this matchup.
I agree. And that's where I think also that Kansas City doesn't want to. They've got weaknesses in their secondary. Sorensen, their free safety, he's so bad he's a meme on Twitter. I mean, he's just atrocious. Having said that, I'll give you a prop here that I would probably bet in this game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, last check, it was 37.5 rushing yards for the over for him. Now, he got 60 last week, and he looked really good. He looked like he looked, as somebody said, another person said on Twitter, they said he looked angry. This is a guy who had been out for a while, was mad, and I'm going to make show people. I look at that and go, all right, Cincinnati's rush defense has allowed 133 rushing yards in 4 of their past 6 games. And I think they'll give Edwards enough carries. I think the Chiefs would like to run the ball 25, 30 times in this game. You'd always like to do that, but I think their game plan will put toward that direction. So I would definitely take him on the over there.
Yeah, 36.5 is actually where it sits right now, but the over is -115, the under there -110, and they brought him out of the bullpen, and he looked great. He looked fresh. He looked as fresh as he's looked in a couple of weeks, and so I would definitely expect him to have a pretty large role in the offense in this game, however that ends up being. Yeah, I think that both teams are probably going into this one assuming that they're going to need 27 to win it. Maybe they need more. Maybe it turns out they need less. But as you're building your game plan and practicing through the week, that's probably the number, I would guess, that's in the back of your mind, which adds up to the point, the spread or the total, at 54.5, at 27, 28, 30, you would assume you need to get into that range if you're going to come away with the victory. So I would expect both teams to have that in the back of their mind. And I look at what Jamar Chase did in the first game against these two teams. You always think as a team going up against the Bengals, Jamar Chase is the guy who scares you the most, because Jamar Chase is the guy who gets 70-yard touchdowns. Jamar Chase is the guy who we saw last week. The only catch he had in the first half against the Titans was what seems like a harmless enough screen. It was actually a little bit off target from Joe Burrow, and he's able to turn what could be a 1 or 2 yard gain into a 55-yard gain, as he did on that play, and set the Bengals up for one of the Evan McPherson field goals. So he's the guy you think about, and I know he's going to be the guy that you game plan for the most if you are the Chiefs. And that's doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stop him, but it does drive me to look at T. Higgins props. T. Higgins 73.5 is his receiving yardage prop. His anytime touchdown is sitting at +140, and T. Higgins, a very dangerous receiver in his own right. And so I do like to, maybe take a play on these T. Higgins props, 73.5 +140 on the yardage total. I also look across the side at the Chiefs passing game. You see Tyreek Hill at 78.5, Travis Kelce at 76.5, both of them -120.5 for any time touchdowns. If you were going to throw down your lot with one of these big Chiefs pass catchers, who would it be and why?
I would still probably. They're good. They'll game plan for Kelce and try and throw to him. But I still, after Hill's the other guy. But one pass against the Bills last week. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a 12-yard in, and then all the way across the field and all the way back up the field. It's like playing Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl back in the day. I would bet Hill, just because he can turn those into there. And if the Bengals, I would prefer to go with whoever,
Yeah.
game plan wise, I think they're going to want us to go to Kelsey and things, but the game plan wise, the Bengals going to take him away. So the guy who can just say, hey, even if you game plan me, I could score. And that's more Hill than it is Kelsey.
You know what I find really interesting on the Chiefs side is Byron Pringle. 39.5 is his receiving yardage prop. His anytime touchdown is sitting at plus 210. And it just feels like over these last few weeks, they've turned, like, Mecole Hardman's a gadget guy. Mecole Hardman's not really out there running routes. It's jet sweeps. It's get the ball in his hands in space, throw him a screen, see if he can make something big happen. And he's even losing some of those touches to Jerick McKinnon. And meanwhile, you've got Byron Pringle, who is like really stepped up as the next pass catcher behind Tyreek Hill and behind Travis Kelce. He's the guy who's getting those opportunities. So to see him at just 39.5 on the receiving yardage prop is someone who I find myself to be very interested in this weekend.
Another player I would point towards is mentioning the running game for the Chiefs, possibly being something like to lean on. By the way, I look up the number here in shootout games, or what are near shootout games, which is where each team where one team scores 24 points and the other team scores 20. So you got close enough to shoot up, but both teams didn't get 24. Kansas City's 6-4 in shootout or near shootout games this year. And one of the losses was to Cincinnati. So that's why they don't like to get in the high-scoring games, so they get avoid it. But if I'm looking at that ground game for the Chiefs getting moving, and I'm looking at possibly vertical passing as well, to the extent they'll do it, Jesse Bates, the free safety for the Bengals, he's sitting at 5.5 tackles for the over-under. Yep. I just have a feeling that you're going to get those safeties out the box, try and tackle. And he's been getting a number, getting that number and over at a fairly decent clip of late. So I like him for the over and 5.5 tackles, because I think the safety is going to do a lot of tackling for the Bengals.
All right, just for the fun of it here, who goes to the Super Bowl from the AFC, and does that team end up covering?
I think Kansas City does win this game. I do not have enough faith in them to think that they will cover in this contest, though. I think 7.5 is too much. I think that they win by 3 or 4 points. When they lost, by 3 points the last time around. Yep. I think they'll turn that around and get a touchdown swinging the other direction, but that's not enough to get the cover. So Chiefs for the win, but Bengals for the cover.
I am in total agreement here. I actually probably will have a little bit of money on Bengals plus 7.5, but I think the Chiefs win this game. I said back at the start of the playoffs, Chiefs-Bills in the divisional round, that's the AFC Championship game. No reason to go away from it. Chiefs go back to the Super Bowl for the 3rd straight year, but I think the Bengals keep this fun, keep it close, and give us a really good start to our football Sunday. We, of course, wrap up football Sunday with the NFC Championship. Rams and 49ers. Rams 3.5-point favorites. 49ers plus 145 on the money line. 45.5 the total in this game. These teams, obviously, as division foes, met twice in the regular season. 49ers wins 31-10 back in week 10, and then 27-24 in week 18, a game that totally turned upside down the NFC playoff bracket. It got the 49ers in. It kept the Saints out. It bumped the Rams from the 2 seed down to the 4 seed. It changed every single matchup that we would have seen in the wild card round of the NFC playoffs. If that game goes the other way, if the Rams hold on to the 17-0 halftime lead or the 24-17 lead with 2.5 minutes left or so after the Cooper Kupp touchdown, we would be looking at, obviously, and then even on top of that, just a totally different NFC Championship game. But here is where we are. Anything you draw from the regular season matchups between these two teams for this NFC Championship matchup?
Well, first off, Jimmy Garoppolo would certainly be looking for a new employer if that game doesn't turn around. And now who knows what's going to happen. The takeaway from that game is what we've been taking away from the Niners and Rams matchups over the past 3 years. The Niners have won 6 straight. I mean, and they think, and remember this has come up a couple times this year, and it kind of came up, I think, last Sunday, where you look at the Rams and you go, they're not a team. Marty Schottenheimer used to say about the Raiders that if you could get them to play for 60 minutes, back when the Raiders were in Los Angeles, if you could get those Raiders teams to play for 60 minutes, he basically said, I don't know if he used this term, but they were too Hollywood. And that if you made them play 60 minutes, they weren't going to do it. And so fine, they might get out to a lead or something, but if you kept it after them for 60 minutes, they would eventually fold their tent or just not play hard for the whole game. And you look at the Rams last week, Jalen Ramsey he looked like he was ready to go in the locker room, halftime, the way he was making tackles. And he was just, kind of trying to do ankle tackles. And on that touchdown pass to Evans, he could have tackled at the 5-yard line and just gave up. I see too much of that to the Rams, and I think the 49ers know this, and I think the 49ers say, fine, we go after you for 60 minutes, and the Rams don't handle power football very well. They've got very good players, but they don't like getting punched in the mouth. That's not what they want to do, and the 49ers just say, we'll just keep punching them out the whole game. So from that perspective, I look at that and say, okay, I think San Francisco is going to play that same style of game and lean very ground heavy and try and go power heavy football, and I think it's going to probably be pretty effective.
So, are you throwing this back a couple of years? Are we getting Chiefs Niners in the Super Bowl?
I think I'll get ahead of myself. I think we are getting Chiefs Niners. I would definitely take the Niners with the money line on this game. I think they're going to win outright. I think that there's a lot of reasons to think that they will, but the big thing for them, I'll give you one more stat here. The key to a 49ers win is that they protect the ball, because when they have turned the ball over one or fewer times this year, they're 10-1. When they turn the ball over 2 or more times, they're 2-7. So the thing is, though, is that
10-1 is more impressive than the 2-7. That's an instructive number for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is that even if LA does win let's say LA gets to 2 takeaways, LA's been very turnover late. They've turned the ball. They've 2 more giveaways in 4 of the past 5 games, including 4 last week. So I think it's going to be tough for LA to win the turnover battle in this one. And I think I think 2 turnovers might not be enough for them to win this one.
All right, well, I love that you're going Niners with a straight-up victory, not just the +3.5, because I love the Rams. Rams -3.5 is probably my favorite bet of the weekend.
Really?
Yeah, you're right about the turnover part. Matthew Stafford in the 2 regular season meetings between these teams just didn't play well. 481 passing yards, 6.5 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I mean, there you go. That really is, if you wanted to highlight one stat line and one only as why those 2 games went the way that they did, I think that's the one that I would pick. And so I think that the 49ers need to do something similar to that. On the flip side, you had a very efficient, basically the best version of Jimmy Garoppolo that you're really ever going to see. Just short of 500 yards in the 2 games, 9.7 yards per attempt, 75% completion rate. And so right there, you just compare the quarterback performances against one another, and it becomes easier to understand why a 49ers team that is inferior on paper to this Rams team went 2-0 against them in the regular season, came back from a 17-0 deficit with their playoff lives on the line in week 18. And I think that that's going to be a similar script that the 49ers look to in this game. I just don't necessarily think that they can do that again to this Rams offense. And so that's why I lean toward the Rams. Rams -3.5, my favorite bet of the weekend, my favorite bet of this game. I will say, if we look over into the prop world on this one, though, KC, I love Deebo Samuel rushing attempts. They're not yet posted, but whatever it is, I'm going to be liking the over. He's had a big role on the ground for 2 months running. It basically goes back to this first game where these 2 teams in week 10, where Deebo Samuel started becoming a key part of the 49ers run game. He ran for touchdowns in both meetings between these 2 teams. And so I think that that's going to be something that they really commit to. It was something they did in both games. It was Eli Mitchell had 25 plus carries in both games. Deebo Samuel, 5 plus carries in both games. And I don't see why the 49ers or even how the 49ers could get away from that sort of game plan in this matchup.
He's their lightning back almost. If they want to run wide zone, if they want to run the old Alex Eve wide zone, that's who they're going to, because he's that good. They even saw a clip a few days ago where they're running it. They're running wide zone out of orbit motion. That's where you have the running back come, or the player come all the way around behind the line of scrimmage, and then they have him run wide zone. That's a long developing play, but they have that much faith in his ability to be able to stretch that field, and it allows you to make cutback moves that you don't usually get to make. I'll say this, that I totally agree with you on Deebo, that, I mean, he's had a double-digit carry on the past couple of games. He's only at 39. You can double-check if that's changed now, but the last check was 39.5 rushing yards for the over for him. The 49ers gained 291 rushing yards against the Rams in their 2 matches.
And they stay with it. I mean, that 17-0 comeback proves to you they stay with it until they absolutely cannot stay with it any longer.
Exactly. And so, I mean, you're talking, and 291 yards. Yeah, 30.5, 291 rushing yards against the Rams in 2 matchups, and they gave him 10 carries each the last 2 games. If you give him 10 carries in this matchup, I think that he'll actually absolutely hit it. And on a related note, Aaron Donald, his over-under for tackles 4.5. And he only, in the 2 games that they played against the Niners, he had 8 and 7 tackles respectively in those matchups. So I don't understand why his tackle number isn't high. I can see why, if you look at the games as a whole, because I'm pretty sure that's how they generate it, is they look at the games as a whole and say, okay, where's his midpoint for what he does normally?
Yeah.
That's not what they do against San Francisco. With 15 tackles in 2 games, I think he easily goes over 4.5 in this one.
San Francisco gives those defensive linemen more opportunities to get tackles than most teams do with the way that they run the ball and how they commit to the run. So definitely something that you want to think about there. So I got the Debo prop. My favorite other prop, Cooper Kupp, 102.5 receiving yards. Like, I mean, how high would the number have to be before you even considered the under? I mean, it would have to be at like 110 before I thought about not betting the over, and like 120 before I thought the under was a good play.
I mean, it was, but that's the thing. If you're the odds makers, I mean, you're basing it based on what the public is, and I still think the public, just as good as he is, somehow it still hasn't sunk in that that's how central he is to their offense. Yeah. He's the dink and dunk guy. He's the vertical guy. Not many guys can do that. A lot of guys, because you got the dink and dunk guys, you got the medium guys, and you got the deep guys. You got guys who can use him in a variety of ways, and they incorporate him in everything. I mean, that's not what Robert Woods would do for them. That's not what OBJ does for them. They don't do that. But when they look and they're creating all their passing concepts, he's involved wherever it is at any level, and it's such a rare skill to be able to do that, and all of that to have the endurance to be able to do it too, because a lot of receivers can handle 10 targets in a game for a couple, 3-4 games, but you start to get him into this line. Even Keenan Allen, if you go look at his numbers, people think he's such a great. He doesn't get double-digit targets every game. He just wears down when he does. But Cooper Kupp doesn't matter. So yeah, I love that prop.
Fun weekend ahead, KC. We're both on the Bengals with the +7.5. We both like the Chiefs to win outright. You like the 49ers as outright dogs to go back to the Super Bowl. I am on the Rams -3.5. Should be a very fun Sunday for us, no matter if it lives up to what we saw last weekend or not, KC. Even though we're against each other a little bit this weekend, good luck to you, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it.
All right. College basketball coming up next on Best on the Board. First, however, a quick message from our friends at BetMGM. Right now, bet 10, win 150, plus 3 free months to The Athletic. Just go to betmgm.com and use the code TheAthleticPod to take advantage of this offer from the king of sportsbooks. Again, that is bet 10 to win 150, plus 3 free months at The Athletic. BetMGM.com with the code TheAthleticPod. It's a new customer offer. Terms and conditions apply. All right, big weekend ahead in the college hoops world, highlighted by the Big 12 SEC Challenge. CJ Moore joining us to break down a couple of these big games that we've got this weekend. CJ, be honest. How much are you focused on your job? How much are you focused on this AFC Championship game?
You about called me KC again.
I know. But it's been that's a Kansas City sweatshirt you're wearing. I can only see the tops of it. So that answers my question of how much you're paying attention to your actual job and how much you've got your mind on the AFC Championship game.
I mean, 50-50. Going to the game. That'll be fun.
Well, let's talk about that. That's obvious. That's the marquee game of the weekend, the one that you will be at, Kansas.
No, I'm going to that game, but I'm also going to the Chiefs game.
Oh, you're doing both?
Well, I'm not covering. I'm going as, a fan.
Well, I know you're going to the Chiefs game as a fan. We have a lot of great writers at The Athletic who actually cover football for a living. I know you're just going to that as a fan.
Do it.
But you'll be at this game too. You'll be at Kansas, Kentucky.
Yes.
This is a hell of a sports weekend for you, my friend.
Busy weekend.
Oh, my God. Well, let's talk about this game. These are KenPom lines. We don't have lines posted for this just yet for any of these games that we're going to talk about. But Kansas, Kentucky, obviously the marquee, the spotlight game, not only the Big 12 SEC Challenge, but of this entire college hoops weekend. So taking the KenPom line, we've got Kansas -3, Kentucky getting those 3 points. 157 is the total. These two teams, according to KenPom, two of the most efficient offensive teams in the country. Both teams can score it per 100 possessions at an incredibly high rate. What do you expect to see with these two teams getting together this weekend?
I think it'll be a good game. I think, I'm interested to see who Kentucky has. I know our Kyle Tucker was just on the Zoom with John Calipari. I saw him tweet out that several guys missed practice yesterday, including Ty Washington.
Yep.
That's a big question mark for me. Like, is Ty going to play? How effective is he going to be if he plays? I think if he does play, I think him and Severe Wheeler might be able to give Kansas some trouble, because you look back to a week ago at Kansas State, and man, they could not stay in front of Marquise Knoll from Kansas State, and then Nigel Pack just went crazy scoring in the first half against the Jayhawks. K-State put up 50 on the Jayhawks in that half. KU has the great comeback, but those guards kind of like, better versions of the K-State ones, I guess. So that's maybe a little troubling for Kansas. I think the other key for KU is David McCormick has to play really well and be able to stay on the floor, because Oscar Tshiebwe is just going to be able to beast anybody else. So, can Oscar stay on the floor? Can David stay on the floor? That's a matchup to watch. Allen Fieldhouse, only 3 points. I think the line will be similar to that, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I mean, it'll depend on if Washington is playing or not. That's going to really be the pivot, I think, for where this line goes. But I would expect if Washington plays, I would still expect that we're looking more at something like 3.5 or 4, and not really 3.
Yeah, I think it maybe moves it a point or a half point. So
yeah, what's interesting about this matchup is that, I mean, if you look, just looking back over Kentucky's schedule and everyone they've played this season, like
killer.
There's no team or coach that's more familiar with Oscar Tshiebwe on their schedule than Bill Self in Kansas, right?
True, for sure. I think that if it gets up to like 4 points, I'd probably lean Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just at 3, I think I'd lean Kansas because of Allen Fieldhouse. Mm-hmm. If this game were played on a neutral court and everybody's healthy, I think Kentucky might be the slightly better team. So I'd probably bet Kentucky. So this is one I'm probably not going to bet it if I were a betting man. But if I have to lean one way, I think I go Kansas 157. I'll be interested to see what the number ends up being. I think
that's my favorite. If Washington plays, I think this game going over is probably my favorite, and just trust these two teams to do what they do offensively rather than trying to say, these guys are going to be able to stop Tshiebwe or Kentucky's going to have something for Oshai Ojabi. So that's probably where I'm looking in this one.
Yeah, for sure. Big game, though. You never know how guys are going to come out. Is there going to be nerves? Last time these teams played a year ago was one of the sloppiest games of the year, and Kansas just barely got by them. So
that was sort of indicative of just Kentucky's entire season last year. Yeah, really both teams. Yeah, right. I mean, frankly, what do you think that Calipari and Kentucky do end up throwing at Agbaji in this one?
I mean, I just think they'll stick like glue to him best they can. If you give him open perimeter looks, it doesn't take long for him to get it off. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, Kansas is going to have to stick with Kellen Grady. Like that dude can really shoot too. So, just put your best perimeter defender on him and hope he doesn't get any clean looks. But what has really changed him this year is he can put on. Excuse me, I got a little gas.
You're nervous.
He can put it on the floor as well. So, he's scoring at multiple levels.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I'm excited. I'm definitely excited for this game. Definitely staying away from any wagers until we know Ty Washington's status. However, whether it's Kansas, Kentucky, the over, the end, no matter what we're looking at, want to know if Ty is going to be out there for the Wildcats before I do anything with it. We just got time for one more game. So I want to go back to a Big East team that we talked about last week that has remained super hot, and that's Marquette. Marquette just a force in the Big East right now, and they have one of the, I think, sneaky fun games of the weekend against Providence. Providence 2-point favorites, 138 the total in this game. What do you look at here? I mean, Marquette, with the way that they're going, I know they got to go on the road in this one, but it's hard to fade them. It's hard to want to bet against them with the way that they've been playing for the better part of a couple of months now.
Both these teams are really hot. I mean, Providence only recent losses to Marquette.
Yeah, there you go.
And got him by 30.
Yes.
So, it's a tough one. Marquette has been awesome. I think Shaka Smart's done a phenomenal job. I think defensively they've always been pretty good, and offensively they're starting to come around. Mm-hmm. But it's at Providence. They got beat by 30. Like, I feel like anytime it's one of these situations come up where you have two good teams and one of them got smacked at their play or on the road.
On the road, yep.
And you're tipped to be like, well, they beat them by 30. Like, they can go on the road and at least win the game, right? Like, they beat them by 30 freaking points. Like, obviously they're significantly better, but no, that's not how it usually plays out. Like, usually the other team flips it and wins. So I think Providence just maybe sneaks by in this one. They play a lot of close games. Al Durham. How about Indiana fans have to be like,
yes,
we lost this guy. Now he's going nuts. Nate Watson, who's one of Providence's best players, just went scoreless the other night against Xavier, and Providence was still able to win that game. Yep. So I think he'll bounce back. I just like Providence by the skinniest of margins. So I think I'd take Providence in this game, but I don't feel super strong either way.
Yeah, Providence building to this point, right? And they've got all the experience on their side, and it's interesting to see Marquette rounding into form at this point of the season with all the youngsters they have, all the freshmen they have playing such significant minutes. You get Justin Lewis and Tyler Kolek. It's just all these guys who, coming together at the right time. It certainly feels like after starting off Big East play at 0-3, now 7 straight wins that all started with that 30-point victory over Providence. I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm going to need something going on Sunday before the football games start, and I lean with what you jumped us off with here, that Providence, we know, a good team. So, like, it goes without saying that they are much better than the 30-point loss they took at Marquette the first time these two teams met. It feels like the right sort of rebound spot for them. And Marquette, a very tough turnaround. After this one, they quickly turn around and play host to Villanova at home, who they beat on the road a couple of weeks ago. But it's a crucial little stretch here for Marquette. Providence, Villanova, and Connecticut, their next 3 games. And yeah, right. It's just, this feels like the one that can get away from them. Going on the road, a team they beat by 30, a good team that they beat by 30. It feels like the sort of game that can get away from them, especially if Providence can control the pace in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think we're both on the right side. But you just come to Kansas City. Come with us. We'll be out there about 9:30.
Yeah.
And although I'm worried that you picked the Chiefs to win that game.
Man.
I just go against us again, and we saw how that played out last week. All we needed was 13 seconds.
Ridiculous. I mean, if I'm a Bills fan, I'm still sick about that. Like, forget about all the overtime debates that we had for 36 hours after it. 13 seconds, just like, that's all they need. It's all that offense needs.
Dude's
to move the ball 70 yards. Ridiculous.
Yep. Do it, Kels. Do it.
All right, so you think the Chiefs are going to win, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah, it's just I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd bet that for them to cover. That is a big number. I'd probably say Bengals to cover, Chiefs to win, and then I think you're on the right side with the Rams. I think the Rams win the game.
It's going to be a hell of a sports weekend, my friend. And don't forget that it starts Kansas and Kentucky on Saturday, along with a huge college basketball slate the entire day Saturday before these football games that we're excited for. Best on the board. We are done for this show for the week. For CJ and KC, I'm Michael Beller. Thanks for joining us all week, whether it was the podcast or here on YouTube. We greatly appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Good luck. Happy betting. We'll talk to you next week. See ya.